Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Peterson, the Manager of Media Relations for County Executive Mark Elrich. I want to thank you for joining the County Executive's weekly media briefing. This week, our guest is going to be Chief Administrative Officer Richard Madalino. As always, we hope that if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and we will get to questions for Rich and Mark at the beginning about the budget amendments, and then we will go on to other issues and take general questions at the end of this briefing. So without further ado, let me now turn it over to County Executive Mark Elrich. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for joining us again this week. We'll start with talking about what we've sent over in the way of the operating budget. As I said when I transmitted the FY26 recommended operating budget a few weeks ago, we were waiting on the State General Assembly to finalize how they were going to deal with the state's major budget gap, because we knew that among the solutions were things that could either greatly increase our revenues or greatly increase our expenses, and we did not know how that was going to settle out. Now that their session has ended and we've seen what changes they've made, we sent over to the council amendments to my recommended budget that reflect both the new revenues and new costs that have been shifted to the county. Here's what I want people to understand. Montgomery County is facing more financial pressure than we've seen in years. The federal government has been eliminating jobs and freezing grants. The state is pushing costs down onto the county, and the needs in our community, whether it's for schools, housing, or public safety, continue to grow. So we've had to make some hard choices. My original budget proposed a modest property tax increase that would have only applied to an education supplemental rate. And to protect homeowners, especially those with lower assessed properties, I paired the property tax credit that would have meant an increase for anyone, that would have meant no increase for anyone whose home was assessed at $495,000 or below. In fact, many would have actually paid lower taxes. But now the state has changed the law to let counties raise their income tax rate from 3.2 to 3.3%. And I'm proposing that we go that route instead. And it's more progressive and allows us to eliminate the property tax increase altogether. And as we know, property taxes fall on homeowners because their property value increased, which is independent from whether or not their incomes increased. Rather, the income tax falls on people's incomes. We'll also raise the county income tax offset credit, provide even more relief to homeowners, and we're increasing the working families income supplement to give low-income earners a little more breathing room, which comes in the form of a little more tax relief. These changes accomplish a few important things. First, they allow us to fully fund the Montgomery County Public School budget request. There was a lot of urgency in this quest. A lot of what they were looking for was money that was going to deal with the teacher shortage, especially in special education, which was creating problems that rippled through the entire school system. The lack of adequate number of special education teachers means that a lot of special education kids weren't getting the education that they needed. And in some places, they were placed in regular classrooms where some of the issues that those children have made it difficult to maintain a learning environment in those classrooms. So there's a real need to deal with this problem, to deal with it expeditiously. They also help close the structural deficit without draining reserves. I'll point out that, Montgomery County the council talks about having a structural deficit. That structural deficit is based on the underlying assumption that taxes can never change. And so anytime you have added costs and added needs in the county, anything you do to address them automatically creates a structural deficit unless you find revenues to address that. And I never thought this was a very good practice or approach, and I continue to think it is, pretty disingenuous when you actually control whether or not you've got the revenues to pay for something. To simply use the structural deficit as a way of saying we shouldn't do something doesn't really talk about how you could possibly solve the structural deficit problem other than cutting services. Our work also can protect working families from being hit hardest, especially when we know people are already struggling due to what's happening at the federal level. Now to be clear, if the council does not support these revenue changes, then we'll be forced to make cuts, either to the school system or to critical county government services. And that's not a threat, that's just math. We can't keep up with growing needs and declining support from the state and federal government unless we have some resources to do it. In addition to the revenue adjustments, we'll also be submitting amendments to cover no costs that have been pushed down onto the county by the state. That includes additional pension contributions for teachers and community college staff, a new cost-sharing formula for the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, which will now require that the county pay 90% of the local office costs, and a correction to ensure the Parks and Planning budget fully funds the employee contract, which was mistakenly left out of the budget when we sent it over. And as this federal budget unfolds, we are certainly facing declining levels of funds for any number of projects that we've been contemplating in the county, particularly anything that has to do with the environment or social justice. I want to add that every existing spending item in this budget is there because it was approved by the council. None of the existing programs got there but for council approval, and safety net items have been a priority for both sides of the street here. Cutting safety net items may save money, but it comes at a cost. Hungry children who don't do well in school are a problem that we're going to pay for later. Reducing homelessness services only puts more people on the streets. If you try to arrest your way out of that, the cost to house them in jails is far greater than the cost of providing the services in the first place. We could fund less rent support and create more families who have to choose between rent and food, not a good choice, or people who lose their housing. We could reduce funding for our healthcare clinics and create more sick people who often put a burden on our hospitals. And we do provide a safety net because the cost of not having one is not going to be cheap. And I think we've kind of recognized that for a long time. Finally, we'll also be adjusting a few fee-based revenues, including emergency medical services and mobile integrated health fees. In a moment, I'll turn it over to our Chief Administrative Officer, Chief Richard Manolito, and who will walk through these numbers in more detail and explain what they mean for our budget process going forward. And I'll wait to the end to say this. We're doing something we can do to avoid for cuts, and we're trying to make this budget as fair as possible. So having said that, I'll turn this over to you, Rich.
Thank you very much, Mr. County Executive. Thank you all for joining us. Thrilled to be here today. As you heard the County Executive talk about, he's proposing an increase in the local income tax. At the very end of the legislative session, the General Assembly added the ability for local governments, all local governments in Maryland, to increase their income tax from 3.2% maximum to 3.3%, and allows us any county to do it retroactive to January 1st of 2025, just like the increases that the state put forward. That 0.1% rate increase is estimated to bring in between $70 and $80 million of additional revenue to the county, in addition to the other tax actions, income tax actions the General Assembly took. It automatically increases our revenues by an estimated $14 million. The county executive, in order to keep the progressivity, that is already the income tax is inherently more progressive than the property tax, but to make sure there's even additional progressivity to it, he's continuing to recommend an increase in our property tax credit, which of course in Montgomery County style is labeled the income tax offset credit, even though it's a credit on your property tax. He's proposing a $60 increase to that, so it would take it from $692 to $852. And then also increasing our unique in the country refundable earned income tax credit program, which we label the Working Families Income Supplement, and we will be matching the state refundable credit to 65%. So if you get a $100, for example, the way it works, if you get $100 back from the state, you'll get an additional check of $65 from Montgomery County. Taxpayers who file a refundable an earned income tax credit with their state taxes, they don't have to do anything extra to get this money from the county. We give the state the money and they send out the check. So there's nothing additional you need to do as a taxpayer to qualify for either one of these two credits, the income tax offset credit or the working families income supplement. So all in all, that will provide additional revenues to the county. When you look at the numbers, we're still trying to put the final numbers on it, but it will allow us, again, to reiterate what the county executive said, fully fund the school system's request of local dollars. And we can't thank the delegation, our Montgomery County delegation, enough to making sure that the school system is getting their full allocation of state aid, as was existed in state law before the beginning of the General Assembly session. We've been able to provide the money to deal with the shift of pension costs that are coming from the state to the all county governments, or school systems. So we've been able to account for that and any other changes and still make sure our reserves remain higher than the mandated level of 10%. We will be over 11%, and that will provide us with nearly $100 million in flexibility moving into the next fiscal year to deal with what comes our way with unexpected changes.
Thanks, Rich and Mark. Let's go to questions about these amendments. Anyone want to raise their hand, or I will start with Ginny Bixby. Ginny, you beat your hand up before I call you first. Go ahead, Ginny.
Good morning, Scott, Rich, Mark. I guess my question is mostly for Mark. A few of the council members had come out pretty strongly opposed to the initial proposed property rate tax rate increase. Do you think that they will be more amenable to this new proposal taxing income instead?
I'm hoping they're more amenable to it. I mean, I'm hoping that the majority of council members are amenable to this. I mean, there is no way to fund the things we need to do in the budget if we don't do this. And so you're going to have to come up with cuts and things that everybody worked hard over the past few years putting in place. And, the worst cuts you could make were certainly to the school system, but everything else would wind up coming out of social services and environmental programs. And I'm really concerned. I mean, none of us, I think, are going to recommend cuts to police and fire because I think everybody understands the criticality of public safety. I think, that our health and human services are pretty critical, as well as the work we're trying to do on the environment. So I don't see an easy way to go. And I'll remind you, and Rich can emphasize this if he wants, the jurisdictions around us, particularly in Virginia, are raising taxes. People are faced with the exact same problem we have with declines in revenues in certain segments, but they're also faced with the need to respond to additional needs. And as I've pointed out before, Montgomery County sits with the lowest property taxes in the DC area, except for Washington, DC. Montgomery County's commercial property taxes are the lowest in the DC area, and the DCs are the highest. So DC has this very interesting thing. Residential property taxes are 85 cents. Commercial property taxes are $1.89. And in Fairfax County, which I talk about a lot, their property taxes on commercial property can get over $1.50 in places like Tyson's Corner. But the starting point for taxes over there is almost $1.25. So other jurisdictions around us have a greater reliance on commercial property taxes. Also in Virginia, the business licensing tax, which gets Fairfax County $200 million from the private sector, they have these resources that Montgomery County doesn't have. So we have limited ways to raise revenue, but we're by far not the ones raising revenues at the highest rates as our competitors are. So I don't think Montgomery County is in danger of somebody saying, I'll go to Fairfax County because you'll pay more there You're not going to go to Frederick because property taxes there are $1.11, and you're not going to go to Howard County where taxes there are $1.33. So I think what we're doing is reasonable and affordable.
So
Yep.
Ginny, let me, if I can add and provide people with some context, having sat through hour after hour of budget meetings with the county executive as he went carefully through every line item and forced the executive branch to make as many reductions as possible. He did not want to raise the property tax, right? This is the property tax is not the fairest way to move forward with taxation because, of course, it's just on the value of the home, not necessarily on your ability to pay. And he was very concerned about that. But at that moment on March 15th, when he had to submit a balanced budget and he had to make a decision about especially the historic increase that the Montgomery County Public Schools wanted in order to meet the various obligations, which you've just heard the county executive passionately explain why it was so important for us to meet these needs of all of our students, that his only choice before us was a property tax. Now, at the last minute, the General Assembly, in a relative, I mean, in what was surprising to, I think, all of us, the General Assembly moved forward in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, this addition of allowing all counties to raise their property tax, their income tax, from a maximum of 3.2, which is where almost every county was, to 3.3%. So now here's a tool that he did not have on March 15th, which I knowing him, I think he would have proposed it on March 15th if he could have. But now that we have this tool, now recognizing the income tax is a more progressive way to approach taxation, recognizing that, you know, if you lost your job now, but you still own your house, you're going to have to pay that property tax increase. Whereas now, if your income went down, your income tax bill is automatically going to go down. So this is a fairer way to deal with taxation. It's a 0.1% rate increase, and it offsets the need for the property tax increase. So therefore, it is again a way to move forward, a way to do it in a more progressive way. He's even increasing more progressivity by trying to deal with proposing the increase in the income tax offset credit on property tax bills, which also offsets for lower income owners some of the fee increases. And also increasing our working families income supplement, which helps our lowest income earners who are out working. So it's a better tax plan. It is one that he could not propose on March 15th. But now, thanks to the General Assembly, he has the authority to do it. And hopefully our council members will embrace this approach, much like every other elected official from Montgomery County, from the governor through our entire delegation, embraced in the income tax changes that the state is making, that this additional 0.1%, our Democratic Council will be willing to move forward in the same vein and support the actions that their Democratic colleagues and fellow elected officials took in Annapolis, recognizing too that part of the chaos that is occurring at the federal level is being driven by the desire to cut federal taxes. And people have to recognize that, you know, in the tax bill they pay, if their federal taxes are going to come way down, increasing 0.1% for their income tax here in order to keep up all these services, public education, public safety, all the other public health, all the other amazing things that we do each and every day to keep this one of the most desirable locations to live on the planet, that they will continue to move forward and embrace this change. And to build a little bit on what the county executive was saying, so Arlington County passed their budget just on Tuesday with a tax increase. and they will be increasing the sales tax on restaurants from 10% to 11%. Remember, in Montgomery County and in Maryland, it's only 6%. There's no additional meals tax. So Arlington County, you'll have an additional 5% over Montgomery County on what you pay when you go out to a restaurant. Loudoun County, Prince William County passed their budget on Tuesday, and they increased the property tax on data centers by 45 cents from 370 to 415. And whereas we have no ability to do that sort of taxation in Montgomery County. And of course, Fairfax County is having their public hearings on their budget right now, and they are considering upping their sales tax on restaurants from 6% to 10%, or raising their property tax by 1.5 cents. So just reiterating, the big jurisdictions around us that have moved forward, they are looking at serious tax increases on residents and on businesses in a way much greater than what we're talking about in Montgomery County.
Thanks, Rich and Mark. Let's go to Liz Feldman with MCM.
This question for Rich, if I could. If I work in Virginia, and I'm earning my money in Virginia, but I live in the county, am I then still subject to this income tax increase, or is it only for wage earners in Montgomery County?
No, thanks for that question. We have reciprocity with the state of Virginia. So yes, if your income taxes are based upon in this area where you live. So if you're a Virginia resident working in Montgomery County, you're not paying the Maryland state income tax. If you're a Montgomery County resident working in the District of Columbia or working in Fairfax County, you're paying your Maryland taxes. So it's in that case, it's just based upon where you live, not where you work.
If I could just ask another follow-up to County Executive Elrich. Were you surprised that the state was able to provide the kind of money it did give to the county this year, considering the budget constraints that the state had going in?
I was relieved, but going back to the point about the ability to raise taxes, one of the things that came from a lot of counties in the state, both Republican and Democratic, was you can't keep loading things on the counties to do and then not give the counties a way to raise more revenues. So a lot of counties were at the cap on their property taxes and at the cap on their income taxes. And so when the state says we're going to, like in our case, you're going to pay for 90% of the assessor's assessment department rather than 50%, and you're going to pay $21 million more for teacher pensions, absent ways to raise revenue, every one of them winds up being a cut in services. And so the legislature and the governor both agreed there had to be more tools given to the counties to provide revenues rather than leaving them where they are right now. And another point on revenues, it's just, Rich was talking about some of the comparative taxes. I forgot to mention this personal property tax, in which he talked about in the context of one county, but just in general, in Fairfax County, their personal property tax is twice the personal property tax in Montgomery County. So if this primarily falls on businesses and it goes to business equipment, computers, all that kind of stuff. The fact that Virginia is able to tax them at almost twice the rate of Montgomery County is another example of how Virginia raises more money from the private sector than we do, which lets them have a little less burden placed on their taxpayers. But actually, when you look at all the different things they pay in Virginia, it's not different at all. They're actually more expensive than we were for homeowners if you consider all taxes.
And of course, one should never, ever forget, right, Mark, that in Virginia, you still pay a personal property tax to your local government on your car, on your boat, on any of these other items. And that is hundreds of dollars. Like just looking at the Prince William news, if you own an SUV, you're paying almost $450 on an SUV as a personal property tax on an annual basis to Prince William County. If you own just a standard sedan, you're paying almost $350 to Prince William County. So, you got to factor those things in too. And again, in a way that is not progressive. I mean, you might say that, obviously someone's income is going to be is going to dictate what expense car they have. But if you've been laid off and you still own that car, you still have to pay that personal property tax. Whereas the nice part is with the income tax, it's based upon what income you're making. And so if you have an unexpected drop in your income, your tax bill is automatically going to reset downward.
Thanks, Rich. Tom Sherwood?
Good. Thank you very much. I would ask the county administrator, Mr. Madaleno, this is a significant change from property tax to income tax. Which of the council leaders did you run this by before announcing it, and what was their response?
Well, it was nice of you to direct that question to me, but I do.
I said both.
Okay.
Okay. I figured because
you can obfuscate and then you can fill in the blanks.
Actually, Tom, this happened really quickly because, as Rich said, we didn't know what was going to happen on the income tax until that last weekend.
But so are you saying you didn't run this by any informal leaders?
Well, we had told the council that once the legislative session was over, that we would know what we would have to do. And I think at the time, we were not assuming that we would get an income tax increase. We were trying to work within the other bounds. There was some other legislation we were looking at and hoping would pass that didn't pass. But once it came across, within a couple of days, we were focusing particularly on the council president, who talks to the rest of the council, to let her know that we were looking at a shift from the property tax to the income tax. We thought it would be fairer. And she didn't say great, and she didn't say horrible. She basically was happy with the information.
Well, thank you. I just want to know if there had been any conversation with the council, and the answer is yes. Thank you very much.
God, I thought you were going to ask me a question about the 2025 Stanley Cup champions, but that's
no. We're waiting for hockey.
I'll give that all the attention it deserves.
Yeah,
right.
Rich, we're holding all hockey questions to the end. Okay, without any more further ado, questions about this issue, we will now move on.
Does Brian Sears have his light on? I think I see Brian Sears.
Does Brian have his hand up? I don't know.
I
Brian
don't.
doesn't have a hand up.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
That's very disappointing.
Yeah, Brian, no questions.
Okay.
One in a long line of disappointment for you, sir.
Oh, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rich. And Mark, if you want to continue on with the rest of the issues. Wait a minute. Liz, you have one more question on the subject?
Sorry, I can jump in with one more. Are there any state taxes, either Rich or County Executive Elrich, that you are not happy with if they increase, such as gambling, the cannabis, any of those taxes that will affect county residents? Are there things that you were not happy with the state?
I'm very happy about the gambling. The taxes on these companies to make a fortune running gambling operations in the county and to have them undertaxed is a real problem. And I remember that, something that literally happened a few years ago. I was down in Annapolis at a pre-session public meeting with legislative leaders. And I suggested, as others in the audience agreed, that, the state should be taking a higher rate of taxes on the gambling. And the answer we got back was, well, one of the big people who does gambling in Montgomery, in the state of Maryland, not Montgomery County, that if we did this here, that, Las Vegas would be tempted to raise his taxes there. And I'm like, what on earth are we thinking when we're worried about whether a gambling mogul will pay higher taxes in Las Vegas because we raise taxes here? So I've always been a fan of raising that. I'm fine with raising marijuana taxes. I think our disappointment with the marijuana taxes is that the local jurisdictions, which frankly, have to deal with whatever problems there are, but also we're looking at this money as a source of revenue to fund mental health services, which we provide a lot of, that we don't think the share of what the local jurisdictions, the counties get is actually fair. We would have liked to see a higher share of those tax dollars coming to us. Those are the big things. And, of course, we had this bill in that would have given the ability to the county to have a differential tax rate. So we could do what Virginia does. And this is important. And the council, once again, refused to take a position on it. And our legislators and the state legislators were saying, well, if the county council is not going to take a position, then we're probably not going to act on it. And they didn't act on it. This is one of those things that we really need to do. This is Virginia's secret sauce. It's what gives them the money to build the transportation projects they have. And all this money flows from the private sector. And they're able to build these projects that people envy that we're not able to do because they've got this source of money. Montgomery County doesn't have that. We cannot do special taxing districts the way Virginia does. We have to apply the same tax rate to residential property as we do to commercial property. So in Fairfax County, for example, the residential and commercial base rate is the same. However, the commercial base rate then has 12.5 cents added to it just for transportation projects in Fairfax County. And then there's every special taxing district like Tyson's Corner layers on additional taxes. We should be able to do that. And we promised the business community we would do the same thing Virginia did, is we would not use this money to fund the general budget. We would use this money to put into transportation infrastructure so we could make Montgomery County more competitive with Virginia and put the things in place that we need to do. So Montgomery County is rated, and the state is rated as one of the worst places in the country for transportation spending. And we're the worst because we tie residential and commercial property taxes together. Politicians are afraid of raising residential property taxes, which provides automatic protection to the business community. And so we get stuck unable to raise the revenues that Virginia is able to raise unless we're willing to punish our residents. And of course, the council members are going to say, oh, no, we're not going to raise taxes on residents. And so here we are stuck. So every time I hear somebody complain about Virginia and compare us to Virginia, I remind them how much more Virginia collects from the commercial sector than Montgomery County does. We're not even close.
Thanks, Mark. I think without further ado, Mark, if you want to go continue on with the rest of the issues you wanted to address today, and then we'll obviously be open at the end for more questions. And if anyone thinks of another question on this issue, we can come back to it at the end. Thanks.
So I think this week I vetoed Bill 225. It's expedited for no known reason. This bill would automatically eliminate property taxes for 20 years for developers who convert or demolish certain commercial buildings to build residential rental housing. And it does that without any serious focus on affordability. You get no more affordability basically out of this than you would get in a regular development not built with this tax credit. They raised it in their last meeting from 15% affordable to 17.5% affordable. On a 50-unit building, that's the difference of about 2 units. And on a 100-unit building, it's a difference of 3 units in affordability. The county has routinely given grants to development that produces more affordability. We never give grants that produce so little housing for so much money. And the bill gives away desperately needed county revenue without any demonstration of need. There's been no analysis was ever produced that indicates that projects need to have tax breaks. So we did a little bit of research ourselves, and we've found 3 buildings in Silver Spring alone that did conversions from offices into residential. One is under construction now, and it's on the corner of Cameron and Georgia Avenue. They took a 5 or 6 story building, added 5 or 6 stories to it. It's going to be opening very soon. They did it with no tax breaks, and it was financed by Sandy Spring Bank. The council is going backward and also allowing people who are in the planning process or approval process to get this tax break. And that even shows the absurdity even more, because these are people who went forward with their projects and put them into planning without any sense there was going to be a tax break because it pencils out. And Park and Planning wrote several years ago that the market had now shifted in the region and in Montgomery County, and that it now appeared that it penciled out to do conversions from office to residential. So all the evidence says you need no subsidy. Instead of asking us, giving the county the authority to evaluate subsidies depending on the particular projects and what they were doing, say, for example, if somebody was going to produce an extraordinary amount of affordable housing, we might be willing to give some additional subsidy. They did this without any evidence of any need and just simply said everybody gets everything. And that's not the way you should be giving out tax breaks in the county. It could be millions of dollars. And this is our greatest fear. You're going to hear the council, like you're already hearing them say that, we don't want to raise taxes. We can't do that. And so you've got a tight budget now that without taxes is going to lead to to reductions in services. Now you're going to layer on a giveaway to developers that if you decide to do a conversion from office to residential, you're not going to pay property taxes for 20 years. This literally can add millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars a year to give away money to these developers that otherwise would go to balance a budget. So this is a real problem. I don't think it was well thought out. I don't think automatic 100% corporate giveaways is a particularly good idea. And our evidence is that people are doing these building shifts anyway. Why are we going into this and deciding to give people money? Because some developers called up a council member and said, we really like this. This would be nice if you'd give us this. That's not a reason for making a policy decision like this. And it's really disturbing the way this came about. Again, no real public discussion until it was upon us. And then when you give a bill an emergency status, that's because there's an emergency that you're trying to address immediately. There was no emergency in this field at all. No emergency at all. And yet they decided to make it emergency legislation. So aside from making it harder for us to fund things that residents count on, this is not a good idea in general. I want to thank the only council member who voted against this, Vice President Jawando, for his understanding what the problems were. And I'm hoping that some of the other council members who realize the full impact of the bill, I mean, the things we're talking about are not things that got talked about when they should have. We need 4 council members to change their vote. Put a veto, let us veto this bill and let us think more seriously about if we want to do conversions, what we need to do to actually make conversions happen. But without any evidence that you need to do something, there's no reason to do what they're doing right now. So I vetoed it. Happy to support it and happy to take questions at the end of this if you have specific questions. On other things, after this briefing, I'm going to be heading over to the Innovate ED Summit at the universities at Shady Grove. We're seeing real disruption in our workforce. I don't have to tell anybody that. Federal decisions are leading to layoffs. The loss of contracts is leading to layoffs. And grant funding that people and organizations have relied on is leading to layoffs. And that creates ripple effect and people are losing jobs. And they're going to need to find new ones and update their skills to be competitive. And I know some analysts have already suggested that the skills of now unemployed federal employees and some of the consulting groups don't necessarily match well with the job vacancies that exist in the DC area. So it's going to be critical to help people figure out how do you upgrade your skills and how do you put yourself in a position to be employable potentially in areas where you didn't previously feel that you were going to be employable. At the same time, we've been working to grow our private sector economy because we know we can't rely on federal employment the way we used to. This has been going on for a while. That's part of what makes Innovate ED so important. This is about making sure our residents have access to training and education programs. The programs coming out of this initiative from the Ignite Hub to translate into life sciences tracks are grounded in partnerships with the Montgomery College, USG, the university system, and the county. They're designed to give people real pathways, whether they're students coming out of high school, mid-career workers who are looking to pivot, who probably weren't looking to pivot, but were being forced to pivot, or folks who haven't had access to these opportunities before. We know that when Amazon passed over Montgomery County for their HQ2 project in 2018, they didn't do it because we didn't offer enough money. Actually, the county was like the highest bidder in this war between us and Northern Virginia. We actually offered more incentives than Virginia did, but Virginia won because they used their education system strategically, and they had a better planned transportation network. they didn't just show what jobs they had, they showed how they were going to deliver that talent, and they weaponized their education infrastructure, and it worked. In the bid that Maryland's Governor Hogan put forward, he missed the boat by focusing solely on money and not listening carefully to what Amazon was interested in, which was they needed staff, needed to know that they were going to be in a county that could provide the talent that they needed. Maryland could have done that if we had positioned ourselves properly in the bid, but that's not something the governor did. We've been building our own version of that strategy ever since. Innovate ED is a big part of it, along with other training and education initiatives we've supported, such as BioHub for Manufacturing, University of Maryland's Institute for Health Computing, who, along with Maryland's Smith School of Business, will bring AI training and expertise to our workforce. And our support from Montgomery College, its biotech, cyber, and data science programs are among the best in any two-year college in the country. And we've recently added an AI incubator in Montgomery County to help jumpstart AI businesses. And even more recently, we are putting out 200 grants to startup companies who are looking to grow in Montgomery County, and their programs got evaluated, and we picked 200 winners, and we're looking forward to seeing how many of these can actually be spun into companies that start hiring people and growing here. We're also working to provide more support for innovation centers and our county entrepreneurs, providing not only training, but also real-time job opportunities for former federal employees and other county job applicants. So looking forward to be at USG this afternoon, talking more about how we support people through change and how we build a stronger and more resilient economy from the ground up. Shifting topics, on Friday, April 11th, Montgomery County joined 30 other local governments and over 100 local elected officials in filing an amicus brief in the Ninth Circuit Court. This brief opposes President Trump's executive order meant to overturn the Constitution aimed at ending birthright citizenship. And we'll put a copy of this in the briefing chat. Let's be clear, ending birthright citizenship is unconstitutional. It is a part of the Constitution. It directly contradicts the 14th Amendment. It attacks children born in this country by denying them the citizenship they're entitled to. And if this were allowed to move forward, it would create chaos. Local governments like ours would be left trying to figure out how to handle a legal and bureaucratic mess while families suffer the consequences. And I want to thank our county attorney's office for their work, and I especially want to recognize Maryland Attorney General Anthony Brown. His office has led Maryland in being among the first states to challenge this executive order, and has taken a number of strong legal stands against lawless and unconstitutional actions by this administration. And I'm really grateful for his leadership. I also want to reiterate my appreciation for U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen. Last week, Senator Van Hollen traveled to El Salvador and visited the CCOT prison, the infamous prison where people are basically stripped down to diapers and head wraps and have basically no rights, and was going to throw an American citizen, has thrown an American citizen into that jail who's never been convicted of anything here. A man this is an illegal deportation of somebody who has committed no crime and had been given status to stay in the country. Senator Van Hollen's visit brought clarity to Garcia's family, and his visit helped ensure this case won't be ignored. I have noticed that Glenn Ivey is going to be going down to El Salvador to do the same for his constituent. It takes courage to confront authoritarian governments directly, and he did it because it was the right thing to do. And in a time when federal policies are stripping away rights, sowing fear, and shifting burdens to local communities, we're going to keep using our voice in every legal tool we have to push back. This Thursday night, tomorrow night at 6 p.m., here at the Leggett Office Building in Rockville, it's an opportunity to highlight Montgomery County's wins over the past year and to discuss the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. The public and the media are welcome to attend. I encourage everyone who plans to attend, consider taking a ride on bus or Red Line. Our building is 2 blocks away from the Rockville Metro Station. For those driving, parking is available in the lot on the corner of Monroe and East Jefferson Street and in the county office building garage. We look forward to seeing everyone there and sharing my thoughts on how we can build on our accomplishments in Montgomery County. Yesterday, we observed Earth Day in Montgomery County. We take Earth Day seriously. and we're celebrating Earth Month, and we'll end on a high note with the 10th anniversary of Montgomery County Green Fest. I'm proud to celebrate a decade of community-driven environmental action. What began in 2015 to help bring people together around sustainability has grown into the county's largest environmental festival. Thanks to the dedication of our government and nonprofit partners, and most importantly, our residents, this year's event will feature everything from electric vehicles and eco vendors to live music and kids' activities. But I hope people understand this is also about the serious work of tackling climate change and promoting environmental justice in every corner of our county. In honor of our 10th anniversary, the first 500 people to register will receive a special Greenfest goodie bag to help them take the next steps in their sustainability journey. So I invite everybody to come out, connect with neighbors, and discover new ways to make a difference. And before we open it up to questions, I'm going to like to give my health team the opportunity to share their updates.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Just two updates this week. One is that it is National Infant Immunization Week, and it just gives us an opportunity to remind parents to keep their children on track with the recommended and, in the case of school-age children, required vaccinations. These prevent a whole range of very serious illnesses. I know as people are keeping up with our media partners that there are measles outbreaks and there are other vaccine preventable diseases that are occurring in populations in children who are unvaccinated. We're very proud that our residents in Montgomery County take this seriously. They get their children vaccinated and they trust the science that tells them that these vaccines are important and they work. Almost all of these vaccines are covered by insurance. If, however, your insurance does not cover childhood vaccinations or you do not qualify for insurance, please contact us in Montgomery County Health and Human Services at 240-777-1050, and we will help you get those vaccinations at no cost. The one other thing I want to mention, and it's related to that, is that although we're 5 years into responding to COVID, this past week's numbers, when we look at our hospitalizations, we have our lowest number of patients in Montgomery County hospitals with a COVID diagnosis. There were only 4 at our last check, and that's the lowest we've seen since the start of this disease. A lot of that we will credit again to the high vaccination rates of our residents. We just want to remind folks that, like the flu, COVID is something that there are updated vaccines every year, and you're recommended to get that update. Those are all the updates we have from public health this week.
Dr. Stoddard, do you want to add anything before we go to questions?
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that the Public Safety Valor Awards that the county and Montgomery County Chamber are co-sponsoring takes place on Monday morning. We're looking forward to having a number of special guests, including, Congressman Raskin's going to step in, Comptroller Learman's there, County Executive, the entirety of the County Council, the State's Attorney, Sheriff Wee, and obviously, we're recognizing about 80 of our public safety responders, not just those who wear a uniform every day, but we're broadening it to include others that support their efforts, from our 911 center, our mobile crisis and outreach team, our emergency management offices. This is just a great opportunity to recognize the tremendous work that they do on our behalf every day and celebrate it with them and their families for a breakfast on Monday morning. So some tickets remain available. We're expecting to have about 1,100 people there on Monday. So it's going to be a pretty full house. And so we're definitely excited for it.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Since Mark has to get up to USG soon, please raise your hand for any other questions on any other issues that we need to address today. Jenny?
Hi, Mark. I know that kind of the highlight of your letter to the council was the change in the tax proposal, but there was something else I wanted to ask about with the Parks Department, that you're planning to submit an amendment for $1 million for the contracts. I know I've asked you about this before because I know the Parks Department was not happy with the original proposal, and I know that at the time you told me that you felt that they were overreacting and it could all work out. What's the change?
Somebody made a mistake, and so when we said I thought they were only taking the money out of the capital budget. We thought we were clear about that. And when I went back and asked them, what did we do with this? There was like, oh, we took something from here. So I told them to put it back in.
Okay, so $1 million is kind of a big difference.
Well, we were looking at, $1 million here and $1 million there. But that was not intended. We actually had said in the meeting not to do it. So when I found out they had done it, I said, put it back.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other questions? Any other issues? All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today on this media briefing. Thank you, Richard Madaleno, for being our guest, and I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Please remember, State of the County will be tomorrow at 6 p.m. We do hope for your attendance, and as always, please call me if you have any questions about any other issues, and I'm happy to follow up. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you all.